We had a lovely talk earlier this afternoon from Spandita, so we continue on with our celebration of our En Foco Fellows who have been awarded solo exhibitions here. So I'm going to go through some formalities and share our land acknowledgement statement before I introduce Amarise. We here at Blue Sky humbly acknowledge that our program is being held on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia, Wimal, Willamette, Willamette rivers. And I'd also like to acknowledge, of course, the many people who make Blue Sky possible. And some of you are present in this room, from our board of directors to our exhibition committee members, to our volunteers, to our donors, to our members, to our institutional funders, to our amazing staff. If you want to raise your hand, people don't know you, see Meyer and Yu Chang, who help to put exhibitions together every month. And as I mentioned earlier, what you see here is part of that, but there's so much that happens behind the scenes too that isn't necessarily evident in the exhibitions. So thank you to everyone. This month, as we reach our show's number 1,000 and 1,001, that's pretty amazing. In our almost 50-year history, 2025 will be Blue Sky's 50-year anniversary. We're particularly honored to exhibit these bodies of work here in the space, featuring our 2021 En Foco Photography Fellows. So a little bit about En Foco. It's a nonprofit in New York that supports US-based photographers of African, Asian, Latinx, Native American, and Pacific Islander heritage. Founded in 1974, En Foco makes these artists' work visible to the art world, yet remains accessible to underserviced communities. Through exhibitions, workshops, events, and publications, it provides professional recognition, honoraria, and assistance to photographers as they grow into the various stages of their careers. And Blue Sky is in its 4th year of partnership with En Foco, so we have the opportunity to kind of uphold their mission and carry forth with supporting our emerging artists. Annually, our exhibition committee will look at I think there's about 10 photography fellows that are awarded each year through En Foco, and the exhibition committee chooses 2. And so Spandita, Malik, Amarise Carreras, who are our chosen artists for this year. And so it's a delight not only to show them, but also to have them present on opening weekend and to deliver artist talks. So now I can introduce Amarise. Amarise Carreras is a photo-based performance artist utilizing photography for both documenting and observing while engaging in performative conversations. The results are images of quotidian moments and narratives that portal history, ancestry, altars, and still lifes that are alive. The performative aspect is referential directly to a gentle and deeply personal connection to the Boricua women that raised them and their passed down knowledge, medicines, and traditions. Carreras received their BFA in photography and film from Virginia Commonwealth University in 2018. They're currently published in Aperture Magazine, Nueva Luz, and have shown in galleries such as Candela Gallery, Side by Side Gallery, Contemporary, and Transmitter, and is also, of course, a 2021 En Foco Fellowship awardee. So please join me in welcoming Amarise.
Thank you. So I guess I'll start by just talking about how making these photos started. So I grew up and was born in Flushing, Queens, New York. And most of my family was also raised in Flushing, Queens, New York, but originally my family's from Puerto Rico. And when they originally came here, they were in the Bronx on my mom's side and in Brooklyn on my dad's side. And so that's where a lot of the imagery and the references come from in the photographs. But my abuela and my bisabuela still live in Queens. They live in the same apartments till right now that we grew up in. And when I say we, it's really like generations of our family. So I had a moment as I started to become an adult where I was trying to reconnect with my identity and my family, because I had also grown up half of my life in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is pretty much the South, and I grew up in a rural area, and so I was very far removed from my family for a long time. And as a trans Puerto Rican kid, I wanted to connect with the things that I felt deeply, but I never knew really how to explain. And it was mostly figuring out how to connect with home without really having a home, including not feeling at home in my body. And so I took time to really begin to learn by spending time with my bisabuela in Queens. So it started with spending a summer with her. And as I spent time with her, it was kind of nostalgic to my childhood, because she raised me for a part of my childhood where I would spend so many of my days with her when my mom was out working. And it just took me back to that place of like remembering her rituals and her traditions of just like how she greets you, how she cooks, how she cleans. Everything is a ritual, and you can tell everything is very connected to her traditions and her spirituality, really, even in just like mundane things like cleaning. And she's always just had this like huge altar in her home. And it's interesting because growing up, me and my cousins would kind of just like run around her 1-bedroom apartment, and like it was always just like really huge, but we were just used to being there. And so it was always kind of just like watching over us in a way. And we just kind of knew not to really ask. But I would always see my grandmothers lighting candles and praying and just having this connection. And I wanted to know more about it because as I started to photograph things, I started to photograph her altar, and I realized so many of the pieces on there represented things that said a lot about who I am. And so I started to ask her questions of like what something like a shell with water and a lit candle might mean, or what saints I was looking at, and what different things she would kind of pray for. And it ended up being this really beautiful experience of learning so much about my history, and where I come from, and recognizing that I do have home and there are connections to be made with my body and with my family. And it kind of just became a healing process for me. But as I learned about the different objects on her altar, I learned that a lot of them represented something so much bigger than what you saw. And so they were almost like symbols or icons. And a lot of her saints, although it's a lot of references to Catholicism, a lot of her saints are of color, and there are pieces on her altar that are not just saints, and there's things like shells and really beautiful objects that are almost portals. Like when I look at them, I think about the beach or the coast, and that's where she grew up. That's where the women in my family grew up, and as I spent time with her, I got to learn about that land. And I got to just recognize that they're indigenous women that have really cared for the lands in Puerto Rico. And as it goes through all the changes of what it is now, I think it's very fair to honor that, and just honor that story. And as I looked at the objects, I was able to kind of learn what that narrative is. And I started to learn about different ancestry lineages that we have because of their practices. And where they learned their practices from and who they learned their practices from. And it started to become a thing where, although it's not necessarily my practice, it started to become something that I felt like I could use to inform my own personal healing, especially as a queer person. Because growing up, I feel like I had a lot of religious trauma and I never really believed in God, but this kind of made me feel connected in an entirely different way to understanding that there are people that have come before me that kind of have guided me through my entire life, and I never realized I wasn't alone until I started to make this work where I felt like it was described like still lives that are alive, like there's so much presence, and each object represents something for me, whether it's a family member or whether it's honoring my body and who I am. Some of the images are really playful that I've made with other Puerto Rican trans folks that have become like chosen family. And some of the images are my bisabuela performing her own rituals. The images with her hands in them and the images of specific idols are her cleaning her altar for the first time after 12 years. 12 years ago, she lost my great-grandfather, her partner, of like 50 years, and since then she had been grieving and mourning, and this was her way of kind of moving forward in a way that she hadn't before, by cleaning her altar. And as she did that, she let me know where she got each piece, and some of them she had gotten from the Bronx, some of them she brought from Puerto Rico, and they were from the women there, her sister. And each one just represented something really beautiful. And there are more images in the other room that specifically represent divine feminine, and divine feminine, like almost like deities and goddesses that they feel like guide them and watch over them. And so I felt like that was really important to depict, to honor their motherhood and that specific spirit of just tenderness and how they cared for us and raised so many of us. And I like to relate that because so many of her objects are specifically to honor them. So I wanted to make that present in the work. A lot of the images that I've created speak to the time that I had living with her and learning about their practices, but thinking about how I can kind of create my own, thinking about my specific experiences. Some of it expresses my childhood self and just reflecting on my childhood self. Like this photo was taken on the basketball court I grew up playing on in Flushing, Queens. Because when I think about my queerness, I always think back to baby me, like just balling it up. And I just wanted to honor who I was because I knew who I was then. And I think that in a lot of ways, trans kids get that taken from them. And it's nice to reflect on who I was and kind of think like my childhood self can be safe as I kind of grow into myself and accept myself and allow myself to be. So that's what a lot of these colored background images are about. Just thinking about my body, thinking about love, like just thinking about like pleasure and joy and the things that I feel like I I feel like I want to manifest because I feel like it's deserved, and it's nice to reflect on things that are alive and present. I think that can be really healing towards things that have happened in the past. And so all of the little worlds I build, I think, are imagining what can happen in the future and how things can be different, but also how I can use these medicine and this knowledge that I already have been given to kind of already inform who I am now and be able to survive. So, yeah, I think that's all I have. I would love to take any questions, or even if we want to look at the other room, we can after some questions.
Amarise, I am curious about the video. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your goal is in the video and how that complements the work?
Sure, yeah. So the video starts with an audio of my bisabuela talking about a time where she kind of had like a spiritual moment where she had a vision of a saint who is known as the mother saint, and kind of like is really beautifully connected to the ocean and manifesting like love and kind of like the fate of your life, like the timing of your life and the way that it flows. And I thought that was really beautiful. And she kind of described just having a vision of like her and how beautiful she was, and kind of like her guided, like watching over her during a time where she was mourning my great-grandfather. And I thought that was really beautiful, especially because there's so much privacy about her spirituality that it was really special. She was able to kind of share that vulnerable moment with me. So I had recorded it. And so that's playing at the beginning as her just talking about that. And then afterwards, it's just kind of like a moment of just kind of my evolving self. I did a performance a few years ago where my mother and my tia did my makeup and my hair the way they used to in their 20s. And it was just kind of a way to like connect with my femininity, but also just connect with like, I guess just embodying really. And there's that video playing with a video of me cutting my hair. And I think that I just wanted to look at them side by side because me cutting my hair is like a way of me embodying myself. That's my ritual. And so I think that's a way of embodying my transness and like who I am as a queer person and feeling really powerful in that moment. And then the altar scene has a picture of my abuela that I think is really beautiful. And I kind of wanted to set up something that honored who she is. And she always has Florida water around her house. It's kind of funny because she always has it hidden away, but everybody finds it. So it's like, we know, it's okay, you know? But she's like, those are my secrets. Those are not everyone else's. And so one day I just got some Florida water and I was like, well, I kind of want to know what you do with this. It's like, it smells really good. It's used to cleanse things. And I just kind of asked her one day, and she like told me some things, and I was like, I'm gonna do that in my house. That sounds so like pure. And so I had wanted to add a little bit to her setup just to kind of like honor, again, who she is. And I forgot that like Florida water has alcohol in it, and so it caught fire. But I was like, dang. I was like, this is kind of freaky, but like beautiful, and like, it was like, yeah, dang, okay. my grandmother does have a really passionate spirit, so. But that's what that video is. It's really just about, again, honoring the past, the present, and the future. We're constantly evolving and changing, and I think that's something that people can really learn from trans people, because it's like, from the moment that we start existing, it's like binaries don't really fit and make sense to us, and so we've already really gotten to a point of like, not really being able to mask or perform in ways that a lot of folks do, and I think that we're denied spirituality a lot. And so, and a lot of times we're denied family as well. And so to be able to kind of, as a trans person, bring this all together, and really, these images are to honor so many people that have informed who I am, but they're really self-portraits. So some objects might make sense, but others might be like, what is this? And it might reflect aspect of who some of you are, but they're really self-portraits, and I'm a lot of things. So.
In some of the photos, there's a strong presence of both colors. So would you mind talking about what's the relationship between these specific choices of color? Thank you.
Yeah, the colors in a lot of these photos are really just like taken from a lot of colors that remind me of like homes in Puerto Rico, because my abuela's apartments, it's like once you step into their apartment, you feel like you're in a home in Puerto Rico, and there's colors and patterns, and a lot of things going on and a lot of objects everywhere. So that's kind of what this is speaking to, is just like visual language that I've already seen before. Any other questions?
I was really interested in when you were talking about trying to recapture your childhood as still being part of yourself, even though you're going through such a journey that it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to leave my childhood behind. And it's interesting because I hadn't thought about that, and it's a very interesting extra burden to have in addition to societal burdens. Like, how do I keep track of all the people that I have been?
That's true. Sometimes I have to like release that, which is one thing that is, I think, important to say, is that like, I made this work over the course of like 5 years, and then it's been 2 years since I've made it, and since then I'm like, this is being left behind. Yeah, because this was like, this was made in so many different phases of myself, through times where I was experiencing a lot of joy, through times where I was experiencing a lot of grief with my family. It was hard to make work about family sometimes, and so yeah, this is really special, but it definitely is, yeah.
So it's kind of a diary of a time that's already moved through that time. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's beautiful to look back on, for sure.
Yeah, so following up on that, has your sense of art or your sense of photography changed in those 2 years too? Do you see photographs differently? Do you take photographs differently? I thought these were more contemporary, and I know 2 years ago was a fairly long time ago, but you mentioned that these were two very different periods in your life, and you see these differently now. I'm just wondering how your art has changed at all, or modified, or whatever.
Yeah. An image that I made this year is here. And this is an image of my abuela on my father's side. And this was an image I found 2 years ago. I was spending some time with my dad for the first time in a really long time. And we're twins. And I wanted to just know more. Again, another way of just like, this is something I wanted to connect with for a long time. And I was given this picture of my abuelo, who in the 60s in New York, in Brooklyn. He was like voguing and going to the balls. I wanted to honor that because I thought that was incredible, because during that time, especially being Puerto Rican, you just don't. And so I thought that was beautiful, and when I look at that picture, I feel like it's literally like me. Like I look just, like there's so many things that I'm just like, whoa, we have the same torso, and I've always just felt like that his spirit and energy has guided me throughout my life. I've always heard about him as a kid, and like very early on kind of knew, you know, I guess his secret, and I think that that's really special to me now that I have grown into who I am, to kind of be able to honor that. And yeah.
Did you know him during his lifetime?
No.
So that's very special.
Yeah. So still making work about family, making new connections. But other than this photo this year, I haven't made any work with photos of him.
I'm raising my hand trying to form a question at the same time.
That's okay.
Yeah. I am really interested in something that you said to answer one of the questions about like what gets lost or what gets left behind. And there's something really interesting paralleling your work between like your journey as a trans person and also like looking at tradition and religion and faith in your family's life. And there's something really interesting that I love what you do in looking forward to how you're making it yours and stepping into both of those things. And that idea about like what gets lost, what gets broken from tradition versus what you step into and embrace, like going to the basketball court, because that's so inherent to you. Do you ever feel that tug of like the things that change as you're looking to the things you're modifying and making your own?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm doing something that I'm gonna get in trouble for, like, cause I would have. But I also think that it's like thinking about, okay, certain things are meant to be carried on and should be, and then certain things are meant to be left behind. And I think that's what cycles of life mean. It's like, I'm a new generation, so it means to like embody newness, but also leave certain things behind that aren't working anymore, because they're just not. So yeah.
What does your family think of your work?
The women in my family, like my mother and my tia, kind of just cry. And there's parts of it that I don't even think they get, but they're still just like, this is so, because that's them, they're really just proud. Some family members, I don't know if I want them to see it, because it delves into things that I think can be really hard, or just like, it's not the norm to ask certain questions. I had a family member tell me that the work is comforting, but also scares the shit out of them. But I think that's like honestly what it is, because I think that like to embody myself is to feel the safety and the comfort of being able to be, but also there's always going to be that those feelings of anger and rage and fear of just like, I guess the harder parts of existing, and so it's all there for sure.
Yeah, this one over here, this large one over here, next to you, is that,
With the mop?
pardon me?
With the mop in it?
This one is right in front of me. with the fingernails.
This one? Yeah.
Is that even though I understand the story behind it very well, that the image itself, that is what makes this image. But to perceive it gives me a sense of, disorder and chaos, but also beauty and theater. And there's a whole, many things that you use to depict your life, but it comes out absent from your life, separated, but as a great image of those kinds of feelings, separate from your own history, but I mean, it exists differently. And that's where its power is that it transfer you, just visually, it just gives you so much power. And many of these, I think, just gives you power, visual power, separate from the story behind it.
I like that.
That chaos and beauty.
This one here, I think, it's just your heartfeltness in it.
Yeah.
And the color is no coincidence. I mean, it's just intended that. And your heartfelt love for this person in the color of heart. And I mean, it's just a lovely thing that I think affects all of us as when you see art, as much as it means to you as being part of this, as a participant in your own work.
It's very affirming. That image, I did that color because I found a leather backdrop, and my grandfather wore leather pants a lot. He was very stylish. And then his roots in Puerto Rico are very much where he grew up, was very much a place that was known to be indigenous. And they have a lot of traditions that are rooted in using red clay. And I was at a residency where they had a bunch of resources to use clay. So I was using red clay for the first time, and I thought it would be really beautiful to kind of tie all of that together.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a question this time. I was thinking about a photographer I know who, when she visits the Philippines, she says that her Lola, she never feels more love from her Lola than when fruit is being cut up for her. Can you talk about the symbolism of fruit in your work?
Yeah.
Why that's meaningful for you?
Yeah, that's literally, that's where it first came from. I was eating papaya with my great-grandmother one day, and she just literally cut the papaya in half and handed me the half. And I was like, what do I, she's like, you take the seeds out and you literally just eat it with a spoon. And I thought it was really sweet because we were just doing that and watching Casa Sellado, which is like Judge Judy, but on Telemundo.
Oh my God.
I thought that was just a sweet moment, and that's where it started. And I was just comparing my body to fruit a lot of just the different shades and how it travels around, just like me. Really just simple connections. And they're also known as offerings to figures and spirits a lot in traditions.
It's interesting to me because I'm a hippie came up and that was the counterculture. And we just sort of basically said, okay, everything you guys are doing is wrong, it's sexist, it's militarist, and we're just going to make our own culture from scratch. And it's interesting to me to see you coming in and saying, okay, there's a bunch of things here that don't work, but there's a bunch of things that do work. And I don't want to let go of the power of the things that work, but I need to reject plenty of it. Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's a more interesting kind of tightrope walk than we had in our generation.
Yeah. I think it's really special to have things that are passed down and to have knowledge of how to survive, because generations before me have been surviving for so long. And I think that you can learn a lot from that, especially because some of the survival tools for now don't work for me. And I don't think work for a lot of us, and so it's like learning those things can be really precious and actually meaningful.
Yeah. You've claimed them. Yeah.
I have a formative question, I guess. You have a very distinct style. There's like no horizon, no shadow, very bold colors. I was wondering if you could talk about how you developed that, how that works, and like what it means to you in your work.
Yeah, most of my work with the documentation were shot with a little bit of a flash, just so that the details would like be more vivid. And then the still lives, especially with the colored backgrounds, were mostly taken indoors with backdrops that are either fabric or I've spray painted. And I just have lights. And the reason why I do that is because a lot of altars are normally inside in like really small areas. And so I kind of like to recreate that. And then the ones outside, again, are shot with like a flash, just so that they can have those details the same way the indoor shots do.